thank you so much for this introduction. And I would like to, first of all, invite you tonight at 7 p.m. to my recital right here, where I will play a whole hour of Liszt's music, Franz Liszt. And since the last piece on that concert is his greatest and biggest piano work called the Piano Sonata in B minor, which is very, very complicated and very difficult, I thought it would be nice to introduce this piece to you today, now, before the concert. So in some ways, this is a little teaser to get you to come again tonight and hear the work in its full, in its entire length. Now, I like to give lecture recitals. I like to play and talk about the music, but I prefer to have a conversation about the music. And this is what I call the art of listening. So now you're going to witness one such art of listening event in which I love to involve you guys in the quest to discover what music means, what it may represent, and what it may do for us. Why this music is still something we play and listen to after even 200 years after it has been written. So let's start with Liszt's B minor sonata, and I will play a little snippet for you, and then I will ask you what you think this means, what you think this sounds like. You can imagine if this were a movie, what would this movie, if this is a soundtrack to a movie, what would be happening in this movie? And there will be some mics going around so that you can give me your comments, or you can just shout at me and I'll try to hear you. Ready? All right, so this is Franz Liszt and his Sonata in B minor. I'll play you just the opening few notes so that you can get an idea of what the character of this piece is going to be like. Yes, go ahead.
Something bad is about to happen.
Something's bad is about to happen. Okay.
It's a cat sneaking up on a mouse.
A cat sneaking up on a mouse. That could be bad for the mouse, right? Or it could be good for the cat. Okay. Yes. Go ahead. Mystery. Love it.
It was a dark and stormy night.
A dark and stormy night. Yes. Did you have something?
I'm at the top of the basement steps. It's dark, and I just heard a noise, and there's lightning outside.
Wow. Okay. Going down those basement steps, and there's also lightning and storm outside. All right. Great. I love it. So what I'm trying to do here is make you realize I have a doctorate in music, but you don't have to have a doctorate in music in order to get that. Okay? The composers were really good at writing music in such a way that we can pick up on that emotion. We can pick up on what they're trying to say. And each of these stories is slightly different, all right? There's either a cat or mouse, there's a basement, there's a storm, there's different elements of the story. But what's in common is that there's something mysterious, something quiet, and very suspenseful going on, and something bad is about to happen. Okay, this is not going to be a really nice and pleasant story. This motif, this musical motif, will come back many times throughout this very long piece. And you will hear it, you will recognize it always, because there's these little intermittent notes, repeated notes, and then there's a descending melody going down. It comes back in many different guises. Let's skip around a little bit and let's follow this motif, this musical motif, and see how it develops. Next time you hear it, it will be very different. It will be like this. that like? Danger, but it's out there, it's out in the open, it's not mysterious anymore, it's happening, all right? Next time you hear it, it'll be all over the keyboard, and it will actually change, it will transform as it goes, so it'll be different each time. You'll hear it first in minor, which means it's in sad mode, then you'll hear it in major, which is in the happy mode, and then there'll be another kind of chord called a diminished chord, which to me sounds very angry and upset. So this is the 3 times you'll hear it later. All right. You hear the 3 times and how different it is each time. That kind of development, we call it development and transformation, is essential to understand this music. The final time that I will show you is also later in the piece, where it is completely different. It sounds like this. Isn't that wonderful? So sweet and gentle, right? And what's genius about this is that Liszt uses the most simple possible musical element. It's a descending scale. So he can do so much with that. He can transform it in so many different ways, and we can always recognize it as such. To me personally, this motif is sort of like a narrator of a story, okay? This is the first one you hear. It's also the last one at the end of the piece. And it appears in these really important structural points, almost like chapters of the piece, so that it tells you what is the current emotional state of the story, of the narrative. Let's go back to the beginning. After we hear that opening, the mysterious cat and mouse thing, now it's time for the second motif, for some sort of maybe a main hero of the story, all right? Some sort of protagonist. What is this main motif, or the second motif, what is this motif going to be like? Let's hear it. What is that like? Sorry? Angry. Strong. Arguing. Defiance. I love that. Defiance. So this character is not very happy. All right? If this is the main character, if this is the main motif, then they're not, this is not a story that starts pleasantly and then there's a, plot thickens kind of moment. No. This is you're thrown into the middle of a problem, an issue. This character is angry. This character is miserable, fighting against something. There's something unpleasant going on. This character will go through the most transformations in this piece, and you can always recognize it by these ups and downs. It comes in waves. There's almost like a striving, like a yearning each time to get somewhere, to get something that they want, but they can never get it. Oh, they always fall back at the end. So you'll hear this up and down. Later it will be much more relaxed, like this. Isn't that very romantic, right? It's very gentle, sweet. But it always has this up and down yearning. You will hear it sometimes very heroic and positive, optimistic, as if it's winning whatever that argument is. And sometimes it'll be just playful and fun and quick. It's almost hard to hear that is that same melody, but you can hear some of those structural notes. They go like this. Has the same up and down kind of thing, and with all the other notes together. So it's much more ornamented, it's much more rich in texture. And Liszt is really a master of creating these rich texture out of those motifs. So there's another spot, a beautiful spot, where you hear the motif in the left hand, and then in the right hand, and then the left hand, and then the right hand. Listen to this. So on. So as you can see, Liszt is here almost writing these motifs into the very fabric of the music. Every little thing, the melody and the accompaniment and the fast notes and the little passages and brilliant little meanderings, they're all somehow made of those motifs. They're all somehow relating to those motifs. That is the genius, okay, of Liszt. He didn't invent this method. Many composers before him used something of the sort. For example, Beethoven in his ta-ta-ta-ta, right, the Fifth Symphony, that whole symphony is based on that motif. So Liszt didn't invent this method, but he is expanding it, and he's using 3 different motifs to catch that. Now, we've heard the first and second. Let's go on to the third motif. We've had a narrator, we had a protagonist that's going through something really troublesome, and now we have a third character. What do you think that's going to be? A hero? We've had the hero, right? The second one. Now the third one is maybe a heroine, okay. Or some sort of villain, maybe. Okay, this is all, I'm inventing this, all right? This is not, Liszt did not say that this is what you should be thinking, all right? And good so, because that gives us so much more freedom in interpreting the music. There were other pieces in which Liszt gave us exactly the program, okay? He wrote a fantasy quasi-sonata called After Reading Dante, okay? Obviously, he's implying some sort of infernal story. In this sonata, there is no story, but it is really hard not to imagine one, because the motifs are so strong and so full of meaning. So the third one, let me introduce you to the third one, then you'll tell me, is this the heroine or is this the villain? Let's see. What's the verdict? Villain. It's incredible how we can all hear that. There's something sinister about that. There's something evil about that. To me, it's almost like an evil laughter. Like, right? You will always recognize this motif very, very well because it has these quick repeated notes, kind of like a mocking laughter. Like the villain is saying, oh, you're to the hero, oh, you have some problems. Wait till I get you. Your problem is going to get much worse, right? So this villain goes through, let's call it the villain, just for the purpose of this presentation, but it could be anything. Let's see how it develops. It will stay pretty much very similar for a long time, but then once it changes very radically. Liszt takes this motif, takes it up a few octaves, and then you register. Okay, slows it down, and then adds some beautiful harmonies. Now, what is that? What's happening with this villain? What is that to you?
The villain is falling in love.
The villain is falling in love. So something good is happening. There's a positive transformation. Or, what else? Does anyone have any other ideas? Yes? The hero and the damsel may be getting together. That's possible. So there's something sweet going on. What if this is the villain that is trying to present himself or herself as very loving and sweet? What if this is in other words, is this a real transformation or is this just fake? It's just on the surface. We don't know. There is no good answer. This is for you to feel. This is for you to think. This is for you to connect to what you believe is right. I love that spot because it's so radically different. And to me, it's always as if there's this transformation. But some people that I've given this presentation to, they said, "Oh, to me, this is like everything in life has two sides." Right? Everything can be used for good or it could be abused, right? And you can see those two sides. Or once I gave this presentation to college students and one student says, "Oh, this is like the villain's backstory." And I love that because especially all the young people, they're watching these superhero movies and there's always sort of, digression in the middle where you see, oh, this is where the villain comes from. It's almost as if you can see when they were a baby and they were sweet and innocent and they were just so beautiful and there was no problem. And then you see what brought them to the point where they became evil. I thought that's a great idea. So all these are options. All these are ways of thinking of this music. But what's important is that you're now getting to know this piece. You're getting to be familiar with those moments, and when they appear in the music, you will be able to quickly just get it, like immediately recognize them. Now, these two motifs, the villain and the hero, the second and the third motif, they often get into sort of conversations with each other, into dialogues, almost like fights. So here's one such moment, which I think is great, where in the right hand you hear the second motif, that with the ups and downs. And in the left hand you hear the third motif. And together it sounds like this. It's almost like a battle, right? And many performers and musicologists over the years have gone that step further to say this is almost like a cosmic battle of good and evil. All right, there's this higher level at which this lives. To me, it could also be inside of one person. Right? It doesn't have to be outside. It could be one person who's battling something, who's trying to find a way out, is making a decision and thinking, should I do this or should I do that? Where to go? But of course, it could be also on that cosmic level. If it is on that cosmic level, then of course there is one moment at which we should hear some sort of resolution to this battle. And there is one such moment, a little later in the piece, where almost like Deus ex machina, there's some sort of resolution and grandiose kind of music. And this grandiose music, happy music, is different than all the other motifs so far because it is rising. This melody is going upward. And many commentators and analysts and musicians have seen in this melody the God motif. They call it the God theme. Do you agree? Can you hear that, how grand it is? The actual melody that Liszt uses here is an old church chant called Crux Fidelis, the faithful cross. So it is not a far cry to imagine Liszt really purposefully using this kind of melody, but also connecting it to the motifs from before. Remember, the narrator motif was descending, and this line is ascending. It's almost as if it has been inverted. There's some sort of inversion going on, and we are rising up towards heaven. But this God motif, this God theme, is also going to be transforming. Sometimes it will be an angry God. And sometimes it'll be a very friendly, loving God. And it will also transform along the story as the narrative progresses. Now, later in the piece, around the middle, there will be a long period of kind of quiet and calm music, and there is a new theme that appears there. This is, we would expect in a sonata there's a point where we return back home. We call that a recapitulation. But before Liszt goes into that recapitulation, there's this long period of just slower and more gentle music. And this new theme appears there, and it's very quiet. And to me, this theme is very, very special, very important. I don't know what it is. I haven't figured out yet what that theme is to me. Maybe you can help me. So after all these trials and tribulations, there comes this moment. What do you think this is? What's your guess? Reflection? introspection. I'm sorry? Contemplation. Kind of like a meditation, like a prayer, right? It's so intimate and it's so personal and it's so alone somehow. Another thing that I thought maybe this could be, I'm not sure, is love itself. Yeah? Each motif can be a person, but it can also be a concept like that. Liszt had a daughter called Cosima, and she married Richard Wagner, who wrote a huge cycle of 4 operas called the Ring Cycle, right? And in these operas, he used that same technique of assigning different melodies to persons, but also concepts, and we call them leitmotifs. That's where the idea of leitmotif comes from. And of course, later, film composers like John Williams used the same idea for movies like Star Wars and others. Every time you hear pam, 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 right? You know that it's the dark side, right? And when you hear the ta 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 ta, you know it's the rebels, the good guys, right? So this idea of leitmotifs can be attached to concepts too. And to me, maybe this is a concept of love that somehow resolves all these problems, all these fights. This good and evil just disappears because there's pure love. And this melody, this motif of prayer or love also has its transformation. It also becomes really, really grand in a sort of ecstatic moment at the end of that second middle part of the piece. And Liszt also introduces that motif towards the very end of the piece. After a lot has been done, we've heard the recapitulation and all these motifs again, we go back to this motif. He rounds the story with coming back to this again. He finds it really important to reintroduce that. And that really does a lot to connect it into a sort of organic whole. He first wrote a really bombastic ending with lots of big chords and loud music. And then last minute, right before sending the music to the publisher, he changed his mind and wrote that ending with that beautiful music in it. So I think it was a really, really important and genius decision to bring that back. One last thing before I'm going to play for you a little part of the piece now, but there's another really important point that I have to mention because it's quite amazing. After that middle section with that love motif or prayer motif, which I'm not sure what it is, right before we get into the recapitulation, this is where Liszt again breaks our expectations and confuses all the theorists and musicians who've ever tried to analyze this piece, and introduces a new section which is like a fugue. Okay? And fugues are really an ancient style of music. They're a polyphonic style, which means there's multiple voices, and each voice brings in the theme, and then they start connecting with the other voices, which also bring in the theme. It's kind of like a round. If you've ever sang row, row, row your boat with others together, or a canon or a round, right? Or frère Jacques, right? That's the style. It's of course much more complex, and there's lots of really complex rules about writing fugues. But this is also what Liszt does. And why does he do that? Writing a fugue is seen as a sort of highest accomplishment, a highest, most intellectual thing a composer can do. Liszt, in his lifetime, was often seen as a sort of virtuoso, someone who just paraphrases, other composers and makes improvisations, but no substance, no real, quality. He was seen as a showman, as an entertainer, seducer. But towards the middle of his life, he decided to devote himself to literature, poetry, philosophy, and a deeper kind of approach to music, a more spiritual approach. And writing a fugue as part of this sonata is sort of like a, I don't want to say he's just showing off mentally, but I think he's saying, look, I'm not just nobody. I can write a good fugue too. And I'm a good composer. And in some ways, by doing that and by writing this piece, he put himself on that Hall of Fame of great composers of all time. And I just want to play a little bit of that fugue so you hear what it sounds like. And it uses, of course, our second and third motif again. But this is the kind of art that will speak both to people who maybe are not musicians. It'll be exciting and really kind of jumpy and bouncy and sinister. But also it will speak to those who are educated musicians who will say, oh, here's an art of the fugue, a polyphonic art worthy of Bach, who is, of course, for all those composers, the highest and the most revered, the most respected composer of all time. They all learned from him and tried to approach his greatness. So this is Liszt's little nod to Bach, though the entire piece is really not to Beethoven in some ways, as we've already said, by using motifs in this way. Okay, we could talk about this all day long. I would like to play for you the opening part, maybe the first half of the piece, through, so you get a little idea of what it's like when you hear it through. We don't have time for the whole piece right now, but tonight at 7 p.m. You will hear that alongside 3 other shorter Liszt pieces. So please come to hear the whole thing. But now I'd like to play for you the opening, let's say the first half of it, and then we'll save some time also if you have any questions for me right after that. Ready? Okay.